WELSTech is a bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersections of technology and ministry. It is part of the podcast network sponsored by WELS, the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. Our show today is hosted by Martin Spriggs and Sally Draper. Welcome back to WELSTech, everybody. This is Martin Spriggs, and we are on episode 688, recorded on August 25th, 2022. Show about technology and ministry, and helping me chit-chat about that every couple of weeks is Sally Draper. Hello, Sally. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Martin. Happy to be joining you yet again. What a privilege it is to have this opportunity to chat with you and chat with many across the airwaves as we talk about all kinds of things in tech and ministry. This summer, we've been focused on enhancing ministry with technology, something that probably has a lot of appeal to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, and is soon to be a course through Martin Luther College, I understand.
That is true. Working on it as we speak. And this summer has helped me kind of think through different concepts. And I'm sure there are other areas that we'll explore, but we tried to hit some very key topics like project management, like personal learning networks. Today is actually the last segment in this series. And it's kind of an interesting one, Sally, as we were thinking about kind of the tools and topics around enhancing ministry with technology. One thing that came to my mind is the value and maybe even some of the pitfalls in choosing what kind of tech ecosystem you want to live in. Because we all have a lot of different choices. It's not like the old days when we first started out in technology, where you had one choice. It was basically one vendor, in a particular category. There was WordPerfect, or there was Prodigy for communication, or the choices were pretty slim. Now it really doesn't matter what category you're talking about. There are the big players, but there are multiple big players. And then there are 1,000 little smaller players that fill niches. So we're going to talk a little bit about the advantages of maybe living in one of those larger ecosystems, and maybe some of the disadvantages of doing the same. And when we say ecosystems, we're talking about document storage and document creation and presentations and calendaring and communications and all that stuff. And some of the ecosystems have much, much more.
Right.
And maybe that's some of the appeal.
To coin a term from the developers world, we could almost call it full stack, top to bottom, including interaction with the ecosystem. So mobile to desktop and all in between, apps, so that what you're picking works wherever you want it to work. So lots of different angles to talking about an ecosystem. I guess just to get it out on the table, big ones are like Google or Microsoft or Apple. That's kind of what we're talking about. Are you an Apple person? So you do iPhone to Mac and all of the happiness and leading apps and tools in that space? Or do you do it in the Google space? Or do you do it in the Microsoft space? And I bet if we took a poll, Martin, people would say they do it in all three at times. And that's what my answer probably would potentially be as well. It's just, where do you concentrate is probably the better way to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And maybe we're not real good people to talk about this because we kind of live in technology. I think the average person on the street, maybe even our average listener, probably is not as in deep with technology as we might be. So maybe, they do live in some of those ecosystems pretty solely. I think one of the driving factors is what you have at work or what your family does, kind of drives some of the decisions that you make. I know that for the most part, and let's say on the personal side, most of my family is in the Apple space, at least from a phone perspective. So messaging happens in messages, on the iPhone platform, and those outliers, so to speak, that are on Android phones kind of get left behind on some occasions. And then at work, you kind of have to toe the line. So let's say you're a Google Workspaces school, you're going to obviously get comfortable with those tools. So that makes a big difference. I think to talk about one of the biggest advantages of these tech ecosystems, let's say you're in Google or Microsoft or Apple, is it's all about the data, how easily it moves from phone to computer to person to drive to app, all of those, to calendar, to tasks, to everything. And that's one of the big appeals of being within one of those systems, is it's easy to move from one modality, so to speak, to another. So you're going to take an email and you want to make it into a task, or you want to make it into a calendar entry, or you want to save it to a file or print it to a PDF, or share it to somebody. That's going to be a lot easier if you're just locked in one system. Let's say you're in the Google Workspaces system, all that kind of works together. But if you maintain, let's say, tasks in, let's say, the Reminders app on Apple, but you're in Gmail, that's not as pretty a picture. So data, that's one of the big advantages, and one of the lock-ins, so to speak, of data moving around a lot more easily if you're in that one ecosystem.
And add to that the complexity of the device that you're on. And you'd like it to be a similar experience on the desktop as it is on the phone or the tablet. So those kind of things work more nicely and are more similar within the same ecosystem as well. So just right. It seems like a simple decision that you make, but then it has ripple effect outcomes as you begin to work with more and more of the types of data that are out there.
And one of the challenges, it just kind of came to my mind, is if you make a decision and you make it too quickly, or make it for the wrong reasons, or you make the wrong decision, you spend a lot of time afterwards trying to make it right, or workarounds or hacks, and then you're now fighting with technology. And I think that's where a lot of people have some frustrations. They're saying, well, I wish it could just do this. And it probably could do that if maybe that decision that was made a year ago, 10 years ago, was different. But it's very hard to anticipate what your needs might be when you're making those decisions, or you don't even know all the factors, the moving parts involved with it.
I'm smiling, Martin, because I think you and I are made of two different types of cloth when it comes to that exact thing. Like, I have seen you time and time again being willing to cut bait and go a different direction because it's just not working well for you. And me, I'm the dig in and fight it and try to make it work because I don't want to change. And so that kind of comes down to your personality. You make these decisions, and maybe you just are the person that's determined to make it work.
Yep. And we're both spending time on something that's maybe not getting the job done. It's moving data around, or transferring to a different program, or doing the research and implementing the hacks that make it work. So I guess it's a horse apiece.
That's true.
One of the things that I think a common ecosystem, one of the benefits is that you're probably using similar commands and shortcuts. So you've trained your fingers to work a certain way. And for the most part, these ecosystems keep that pretty consistent. So it's Control Alt something, or it's Windows key whatever. Um, it's typically done the same way across applications, and that is one of the benefits, and that reduces some of the friction of using these tools, in that they kind of work and look usually the same way.
Mm-hmm. So less to cause you problems, less to troubleshoot because of that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's more intuitive to you probably because it's just the way that system works. And even if you're opening up something brand new, it's probably quicker to learn and that kind of thing because it's going to have that same vibe as the other tools that you use within that ecosystem. Like,
Right.
oh, Google has something called blah, blah, blah. You know, they have about a million things that I don't know about. And I use a whole bunch of them already. But when I discover something new, then it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's easy to plug right in with the rest of the things I'm using from them.
Right. And if there is a sameness to ecosystems, and now I'm even talking about across individuals, let's say within an organization, so across a faculty or a church office, something like that. Now you actually are speaking the same language, you're using the same terminology, the vocabulary is the same. The documentation that you write, if you are a tech director who's responsible for setting up processes and figuring out how people should work together and some consistencies, that makes that life a whole lot easier versus, well, if you're on a Mac, you do it this way. If you're on a PC, it's control something, or if it's a bookmark, or it's a favorite, or it's a drive, or it's a OneDrive, or it's a drop. It goes on and on. Calendaring the same way. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But to have some sameness across not just your own workflow, but the workflow of others, and that's that's one of the reasons technology is where it is to increase that collaboration. What makes a lot of sense to try and live the same way, because not only are you talking the same language, but you're supporting it, and things just go a little bit better.
Your file types are the same. So I can remember
Mm-hmm.
back in the day when we were at St. John's and Sleepy Eye, they pretty much were using the Microsoft world. You know, they had Word documents, .doc or docx,
Mm-hmm.
and we came in using Google Docs, and that was kind of difficult to mesh the two file types. Now, I will say both brands have gone a long way towards being able to translate and open
Right.
things in the other formats. And so now if you upload a Word doc to Google Drive, it'll open right up and you can edit it with Google and still save it as a Word doc and things like that. So they've gone a long way to make it a lot more seamless across the ecosystems, but
Mm-hmm.
still it's a lot easier if everybody's just using the same thing.
Portability, if somebody comes in or out and you need to transfer ownership of files. Security is a huge thing. You secure you secure documents differently in different ecosystems, and it all is dependent on login and roles and responsibilities. If you're across different ecosystems, that becomes very difficult to manage and sometimes confusing. And confusion when you're talking about security is not a friend. So you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with how you're storing, where you're storing, the tagging system that you use, or the indexing system that you use, or the ability to search one place versus many places. All those are benefits of kind of living in that one tech ecosystem.
And then kind of back to that concept of across your work environment, it's important to make decisions that place things in places where they're still available if you're no longer there. So where
Mm-hmm.
you don't have personal ownership, but it's more taking advantage of the system and the ability to either share ownership or put it on an account. I think Drive has something like shared drives now and things like that. But just ensuring that the world's not going to crash if you need to take away your personal identity out of the mix in the work world.
Right, right. So those are the advantages, and there are a lot of them. That's why we started with those, and that's, I think, why we wanted to talk about this topic. But there are some disadvantages of kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. One that I can think of right off the top of our conversation here is you are kind of stuck with the tools that are provided. So if there is a latest and greatest new shiny to-do application that is outside of your ecosystem, you have to now jump out of it and try and make it work if you want to go that route, versus using the tool that's provided by the vendor, by the horse that you're riding. So if Google's Task Manager is what you've got, or its note-taking tool is what you've got, but you've seen other much better tools and tools that might fit your workflow better or the way you think better, then you're kind of stuck using an inferior tool that maybe you're forced to do it the way they do it, or do some your own little internal workarounds for different ways that you want to work.
Mm-hmm. Also, it can be harder to do that interactivity with other systems. So
Right.
secure emails outside of your email client or email provider of choice or whatever might be an example. It works real well when you're sending to someone else on Gmail or whatever, but if you're sending it outside of that, maybe it doesn't work as well. So crossing the lines can get a little bit more difficult. Although, again, they've made it easier over time. They've worked hard to make things more compatible.
Sure. As we mentioned, you are at one vendor's mercy, and if they decide to discontinue a tool or change it, Google Meet comes to mind. They've had, I don't know how many kinds of messaging apps and video conferencing apps, and now you have to change as they change, and retrain everybody if you're if you've selected that tool, or you're just kind of right there with them, and you have to kind of live with their decisions versus your own decisions. So that is, I guess, an advantage and a disadvantage. So it depends on who the vendor is, of course. And then we talked a little bit about this sharing concept. I think sharing can be a challenging thing if you're not living in that same ecosystem. So if you are, let's say, sharing, if you're in a Microsoft world, so you're sharing your Word docs and your Excel files and your PowerPoints with somebody who's living solely in the Google world, while they can open those files, they can't always, it's not as seamless. So they have to kind of upload it to Drive and use the viewing tools that are available there, and they don't maybe have all the tools that are available. And then if you want to edit and save it and share it back, some things get lost. So there's kind of that something lost in translation effect. So you kind of have to live with that too.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to where you were talking about being at the vendor's mercy, Martin. One thing that we've seen happen through the years we've talked about in the past is the vendor changing their policies. And again, you're at their mercy. If something pretty dramatic about their usage policy changes, then you might be kind of up a creek where you might want to move away from them, but yet you've invested in a particular ecosystem. So maybe being more spread could be a little bit of an advantage there, or being able to, maybe that's something we should talk about, is how you would change, how portable is your data? How could you, make a transition to something else if something dramatic did come up? Something to consider.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of, let's say, Google Docs. You've got your whole everything in Google Docs, not a super portable format. You'd have to go in and export or convert all that, or export it to PDF, or even though they have things like Google Takeout, which will allow you to get all your data out, it's not the be all end all of trying to get it into something else.
True.
So yeah, totally. Other disadvantages, can you think of any others that come to mind, Sally?
Well, I guess, from a personal perspective, if I invest and I know one system, that means I maybe don't know the others, or I'm not as comfortable just jumping into the others. And for me personally, I often am jumping into other spheres. Like, I have my personal life and I have my work life, but then I might volunteer here or be on this board or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they're communicating in a different ecosystem than what I'm used to or whatever. So keeping your skills flexible enough to be able to interact as needed. Often at work we use Teams for video conferencing, but knowing enough about Zoom, which isn't really in any of these ecosystems, but knowing enough about it so that I can comfortably, communicate there, have the setup that I need there is important. So maybe just continuing to keep your skills sharp, evaluating new tools as they come out or become very popular.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I guess I would recommend, if you do kind of go I'm going to take best of breed or what makes me most comfortable in all of these areas rather than to stick to one's ecosystem, there are tools, bridge connector type tools that can make life of sharing data and making things work together a little bit better. Some of them are free, some of them are paid for. Zapier is one. If then that is another.
Yep.
Yep. There are, options there, and it's, that adds a little bit of complexity because now you're at the mercy of a middleman, to make all this stuff work together. And you got to be a little bit kind of comfortable with geeking out on some of this stuff, and learning how the connectors work. But that is possible. So it's not that you pick one and you can't go anyplace else, or you pick 10 different ones and you can't talk to each other. There are some gray areas where you want to do that. I guess going back to being at one vendor's mercy, one thing that sometimes happens is that vendor starts charging for a service that had been free, or charges more, or goes a different direction, says, we're going to more cater toward more bigger business than you small businesses or medium-sized businesses, and it just doesn't fit you anymore. So you kind of have to deal with their decision at that point and make a decision going forward.
So I guess the moral
Sally,
of the story is that none of the ecosystems are probably where you want to be 100% of the time. You probably want to keep your options open or be familiar with the others, at least, even if you mainly live in one. Have the flexibility to use the others or other best products that come out to supplement what you're doing in your favorite ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say to our listeners, if you have a favorite ecosystem and reasons that we haven't listed here, let us know. Or if you can think of some pluses and minuses that we didn't talk about, love to hear those too. Or maybe even some success or horror stories that you may have had because you hitched your boat to a particular vendor, and you had some issues as a result of that. So interesting conversation, though, because it does really affect how efficient and how much of a good steward you are with the tools that you have, or how much you fight against it, and how much time that is spent just kind of working with the tools versus doing the ministry. It becomes less enhancing ministry and more just trying to maintain, or just treading water, so to speak. So good stuff.
Definitely.
Sally, we should probably move along with our show, and that means we are to our tips/picks of the week. What do you got this week?
Well, this week I'm going to share an article from Tech and Learning online magazine, which is obviously education centric, but I actually was thinking about this article in terms of ministry and church ministry in particular. And it's a topic we've talked about before on WELSTech over the years. And it has to do with QR codes. So QR codes are those square scannable codes that will take you somewhere on the web when you scan them. And so you can use them to get people where you want them to land on your website or on some website along the way. And the concept here is that teachers can allow their kids to use their phones in class. That's kind of how the article is written, because your phone camera will scan these codes and you can make use of that to get students where you want them to be. And they list a lot of different QR code generators in the article, which is, I think, very advantageous for anyone who's listening, not just for teachers or particularly in ministry settings. It's really nice to be able to direct people to some content that you have on the web, and using a QR code is a really easy way to do that. It used to be back in the day, Martin, that you had to download a special software to use the camera on your phone and read the QR code. But now just typically smartphone cameras do read these and direct you to the particular link that's there. And I was remembering, I don't know if we talked about it on the show. It seems like maybe we did, that someone had just put a QR code on the back of the pew in front of you. So when you sat down for church, you could easily scan a QR code to maybe record your attendance in worship or whatever it is that you'd want them to pay attention to. It could be easily there. Our church includes a paper attendance sheet. We call it the connection card, and people can put prayer requests and all kinds of things. But also on that paper is a QR code, and the pastor announces every week, please fill out your connection card or use the QR code to fill it out online. And it just links to a Google form, basically, that asks the same questions as are on the paper form, so people can have their preference. So creating QR codes is a good thing and something that you might want to consider for easy communication around anything you want to drive people to on your website in particular. One that's mentioned here is Google Chrome. If you use the Chrome browser, there's a little icon on the address bar on the far right that has an arrow pointing off to the right. And when you click that icon, there's an option right there from anywhere you are on the web to create a QR code. So Google makes it super easy. If you live in the Google ecosystem, you can easily create QR codes right there in the Chrome browser. Just click on that special icon. So if that's not good enough for you, or you're totally against the Chrome browser, there's plenty of other options in this article for you to create QR codes. Again, reach out to WELSTech and tell us how you're using QR codes in your ministry, because everyone's, I think, eager to learn and make use of better and better communication tools all the time. That's my pick of the week.
Very nice. I was just checking Edge to see if they have a similar feature, and I don't see it. They have a share, and they share to Twitter, WhatsApp, Outlook, all that stuff, but I don't see any QR codes. So Google's got that one for sure. I didn't know that. That's a great tip. QR codes are kind of an interesting.
Hang on.
Thing.
I have a correction for you. I just Googled it. Try right clicking on the web page and see if it's in the right click menu, anywhere where it's blank on Edge. Is there a create QR code for this page in the right click menu? Or are my sources incorrect?
Oh yeah, there is.
How about
create
that?
QR code for this page. Looky there.
Built
Just a different way to do it.
Right
I went
click
up to
menu.
the share and did not find it. So cool. All right.
So, whatever
That's the way we roll on
ecosystem
this
you're
show.
in.
Yeah, just in time is how
There
we
you
do
go.
it here. So, QR codes are kind of interesting because they have been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And when they first came around, they were novel, and everybody said, "Hey, look at this." And then it seems like they almost disappeared. Like there was 3, 4, 5 years where you just never saw them. I think people couldn't find a use for them. They didn't fit a need. And now they're everywhere, and they are the way to kind of connect, the analog world with the digital world. You see them on billboards, and you see them on your TV screen.
At restaurants to get the menu.
It's on the table, exactly. And everybody now kind of knows how to use them. And I think that was probably the tipping point where, they were super easy to use with whatever phone you had to get to the site. But yeah, so you see some interesting use cases now. So good stuff. All right, my pick of the week is actually something, and I can't say that I used it, but it has been used on me. And that is a product called Bonjoro, BONJORO.com. And the way I was introduced to it is I signed up for some online coding training. And this was actually a fairly mainstream instructor with probably hundreds or thousands of students or subscribers, so to speak. And the day after I signed up, I got this video message from him, personalized, where he actually said my name and welcomed me to my subscription and talked about some features of the course. And I thought that is super cool that I have the actual instructor who I've never met or communicated with in any other way other than subscribing to his course, send me a personalized video message. And it was professionally done. It's only about a 30-second message. And I'm sure he sits down at night and does, 5, 10, 20 of these personal video messages. But so I looked it up and it was Bongiorno and Bonjoro. And they host the service. So they host the videos. They have templates. It really looks professional. You can brand what surrounds the video. And I'm sure on the back end, as I'm looking at their site, there's all kinds of analytic tools to see who opened it and et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's some ministry applications here because when I got it, I immediately thought, hey, this would be pretty cool, at least in a number of ministry circumstances or scenarios I can think of. The obvious one is, welcoming, visitors or something like that. Although sometimes you want to do that in person, but that's more and more a challenge, just finding somebody home if you want to stop over and, do a quick follow-up. So this would be a personalized way, probably more read or opened than just an email that you might send. But then I thought of other applications. One of them would be thanking volunteers. So you've got a bunch of volunteers who are working on a project and hey, just send a little video, personal video, thank you, mentioning them by name. I think there's all kinds of other ministry applications where this might come in handy. So pricing wise, you get 50 free videos a month before you have to start paying. So I think for a lot of our congregations or schools, that would be a great way to start just to see kind of how it works. You can also have your recipient do testimonials. So if you have a program or some reason to receive feedback from the individuals that you're interacting with, you can do that. There's all kinds of ways to set it up, but this just kind of stuck out to me as maybe one way for you to stand out in your thank you ministry or your welcome ministry or assimilation ministry or encouragement ministry. Lots of opportunities here. Maybe it's even a short video devotion or prayer. Maybe it's part of your prayer chain, something like that. Please pray for kind of thing. I think there's all kinds of things if you think through this a little bit, and there's other services like this, but Bonjoro is the one I saw, and I think there's some potential there for ministry.
Cool ideas, Martin. Our pastor, I remember coming to actually visit online our new church as we were preparing to move to the Mankato area. And he was really great about sending a really wonderful follow-up email. And so I'm sure he would appreciate the idea of augmenting that with actually a personal video message. So
yeah, this was the first. I mean, this is obviously a sales tool for the business world, but customer service, that kind of stuff. But I think there's some neat applications here. All right, Sally, community news and feedback.
And today I just wanted to promote some of the areas that I am overly impressed with as far as having great communication among some unique WELS-centric groups or WELS and ELS-centric groups. Just a couple of Facebook groups that I find always have great information and sharing all kinds of interesting things, always, giveaways. We're cleaning out our closets. Are you interested in any of these things? Whatever it may be. This person said if you're looking to get scooter boards, maybe go to Harbor Freight and get a couple moving dollies instead, and they might work just as well or better for more affordable. So just WELS teachers sharing information. It's a pretty small group, only a little over 300, but there's another group, WELS educators during COVID-19 and beyond, that obviously grew out of COVID-19 and people wanting to communicate and collaborate. And this group has over 1,500 members. And again, they're regularly sharing, asking questions, talking about things they no longer use and maybe someone wants to make use of, or things they need, and people say, yeah, we've got an extra copy, we can share that with you, whatever it may be. So great Facebook groups for WELS teachers. And I know there are many others. There's grade specific and subject specific Facebook groups that kind of spawned off of this big group during COVID-19. And so look for those as well. And then it wouldn't be right if WELSTech didn't mention WELS Intersections, which actually came out of a WELSTech conference way back in 2015. Pastor James Aderman started this group, and it's up to over 750 members, Martin. And they talk about primarily technology and ministry. Pastor Aderman often has interesting websites and articles and things to share, questions to ask, to just spark conversation and have people consider things, and, plenty of interaction from others as well. And so a really great group to ask and share knowledge, especially around technology and ministry. So those are just a few of my favorites that I follow on Facebook. If you aren't a member, I believe all three of them are private groups. So you go there and ask to join, and you'll be admitted right away, I'm sure. But just follow the links on the WELSTech website. I'll just put in a quick plug for WELSTech and for anyone to share with us. You can go to welstech.wels.net, and there's lots of ways to share with us. There's where you'll find all the show notes and links that we talk about during the show, a calendar of upcoming episodes, and lots of other WELSTech goodness, our historic ministry resources, picks of the week, all kinds of resources we've shared since 2008, Martin. We've been sharing resources. So there's a lot here. So check it out.
Okay. Neat. I think that's going to do it. I am, Sally, looking forward to kind of getting back into the swing of things in
back to school for us.
Back to school season.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to welcome Jason and Rachel back, doing our educational focused podcasts here in September. But before we bring them back, we're going to invite somebody we had on quite a while ago, Chris Hunt, who is now with BDJ Tech, to talk about interactive panels. I know a lot of our schools are moving away from smart boards into these touch screens, these actual televisions that are interactive panels. I know that where my wife is now teaching, they all have these interactive panels, and they are super cool. I mounted three of them about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, for head of school, and got a chance to play with them. And I'm excited to talk about these with Chris and some of the cool things that they have there. And I know he's been in touch with a lot of our schools and helped them with not just Chromebooks, but these interactive panels. And a good kickoff topic for the school year to talk about this educational tech that's out there. Pretty cool. So tune in a couple weeks for our conversation with Chris. Sally, thanks for the conversation as usual. Now we got to get back to work and do some other stuff for the Synod. Happy to do that. But so happy that you, all of you, took the time out to listen to us chit chat about ecosystems and that kind of stuff. More goodness coming up in a couple weeks. Please join us then. Thanks. Bye-bye.